Mark, thank you for joining me. Really
You're
appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us your chosen subject and why?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast. My name is Mark Vernon. I am Managing Director at Goal Vision CRM, and my chosen subject is leadership and self-leadership. And I chose this because it's been important in my career, and I'm hoping if we can share some insights that perhaps one of your listeners can learn something.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
I hope so.
So in our prep, there was a line that came up, which I thought was interesting. You said you have to lead yourself first. What does that mean, and what does that look like?
I think it's really important. I think a lot of people, when you think about leadership, especially as a function, people think naturally about leading other people. And for me, it's that old, when you're on your plane, put the your own oxygen mask on first, and then you can help other people. And for me, I think that's really important to identify self-leadership and what motivates you, and lead yourself so you can help other people.
Okay. And what motivates you then? So I'm assuming that's been a process, but what motivates you at the moment?
Absolutely. Well, success. I've always been motivated by success. I kind of feel like where I'm at, if I look back over my career, then I would like to look back at things I've achieved and goals I'd set for myself. And for me, it's about achieving those and setting goals that are meaningful.
And how did you figure that out? Like, I know from my own experience, it's sometimes difficult to really pinpoint what that thing is that gets me out of bed and gets me motivated. Was there a process you went through? How did you figure that out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a part in my early career where I was working perhaps more autonomously, and I realized that I was in a position where I really needed to achieve things, learn new things, and that actually, whilst I had great leaders around me, I also needed to motivate myself. And for me, there was a kind of pinnacle moment where I was like, okay, this is really important. I spend some time understanding things about myself, what motivates me, what tools I can use, how I can focus on improving myself. So it's quite early on in my career, really, and I've always sort of fostered that learning since. So
yeah, that's like, was that just a moment where you went, okay, I'm in this place, I need to recognize that? Like, I'm interested in how you get to that point where you go, I recognize now I need to figure some stuff out,
right,
which is going to help me in the future. Like, how'd you get there?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it was very much being in a position where I had to make a decision of, well, I know I'm in a challenging situation. I need to move this forward, and having that self-realization of like, there isn't anyone else here with me right now that's gonna make that decision for me or push me, and I can either make the decision to push through this and improve, or I can quit and try something else, basically. So for me, I recognized it as a crossroads or a fork in the roads, which was like, what type of person am I here? Am I the type of person where I need that leadership and I want that guidance, which is totally fine, or do I want to be the type of person where I can lead myself, and when it comes to a point where there isn't someone else necessarily pushing me forward or leading me, that I can take that next step myself more easily. And so I sort of stepped back from it, made the decision, and decided that was something I was interested in. But for me, I recognized at the time I didn't necessarily have all the skills and mindset to do that. So it became this kind of epiphany for me, where I was like, well, actually, I need to go out and really understand what that looks like, because I wanted that path. I wanted to go down that road, but I wasn't necessarily quite ready. So that kind of led me to learning more about leadership, the tools of leadership, what it means, what self-leadership looks like.
Yeah, so you went all in, I guess, at that point, and just looking at things.
I kind of went on a learning journey, I sort of read some books, I read some podcasts, so yeah.
What sort of books have been the most impactful on you then, since you went all in and on that learning journey?
Oh God, there's a number. I would definitely say, there's some classics, like I think Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's an oldie, isn't it? But it's a goodie.
It's great. Still relevant.
I think it's really relevant. I always say to people, read that book, and often I get some eye rolls like, oh, that's in the 1970s, Mark, it's kind of old. But there's a lot of really important principles in that book that I think are still relevant today. And so I always definitely recommend people read that book. I bought it for some people.
Yeah.
I think Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and his follow-up book, The 8th Habit, they're very good. They're practical things like sharpen the saw first, begin with the end in sight, be proactive. They sound really simple when you say them, and most people will probably say, well, that's, I do that anyway. But actually, when you go through that book and read it, I think there's some really practical advice, and it helps you sort of reflect and go, well, am I proactive, and am I prioritizing the right things? I would definitely say Ruth Jeffers, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I think a lot of what we might talk about is around kind of the fear of leadership and taking the next step. And I think that book was really impactful on myself, which is, you might be in a place where the next steps are a little bit scary, but can you take them, and if the worst happens, can you deal with it?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I guess that's what the position you're in, right? You're in that fork in the road. You can either, like you say, you could quit and go and do something else.
Yeah.
Or you could, I'm sure you were, there's some trepidation. I'm going to go down this path. I don't know everything yet, but I'm going to learn it all. So yeah, that book's super relevant.
Absolutely.
One thing came to mind there, and it's a little bit off piece, so How to Win Friends and Influence People. I still think it's super relevant. I actually think it's more relevant today for the future leaders coming through, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're in this digital world where actually most of the time we're meeting people less face to face than we ever have been. And building rapport with people, I think, over a screen is more difficult, I guess. Are you seeing actually the future leaders coming through probably do need a little bit more support around that, how to build friends and influence people, how to build relationships, or actually it's always the same as it's always been?
I think absolutely yes. I think the COVID enabled so many different flexibilities in the workplaces, which have been fantastic. I think what's also done is removed some of the human connection, and I think I'm a great believer in in-person connection. I think, yeah, absolutely, being flexible and having video calls and being able to access each other via remote means is really good from a productivity point of view. But I absolutely think that by relationship development, trust, I think that really starts to build when you're in person. I think some of the conversations you might have around planned for meetings can be really positive as well. So absolutely that. And I think that there's probably I'm going to make a big assumption here that I imagine there's a group of people probably in the younger generation that perhaps came through their later schooling years and maybe university years where they didn't necessarily have as much access to other people in terms of relationship development, especially in the workplace.
Yeah.
And absolutely, I think I would encourage anyone in those positions to read that book. We'd probably see more introvert personalities as a result, which is absolutely fine. But everyone needs relationship development skills. There's an old saying, right? By the time you need a relationship, it's too late to build one. So.
Yeah, it's I think it just fast track your career so much if you're really good at building relationships, whether that's internally in your business, externally for clients. It really is, because I spend a lot of my time interviewing people. If I see that in somebody and I go, great, these are great to talk to. I feel like I'm talking to a friend quite quickly. So I know this person's going to go far. It's a real big differentiator for sure. Okay then, so let's go back to leadership. So in your early years, so you went down that path, I don't know everything yet, I'm going to go away and learn stuff. What mistakes do you reckon you made early on that you would maybe advise or just watch out for new people coming into leadership to keep an eye on?
Oh, that's a really good question. Did I make any mistakes? I'm sure I have to really
don't want to admit to any mistakes.
I have to be really humble here and admit my mistakes. I think being really humble is an important one. Assuming that because you're in a leadership position that you're naturally going to be a leader is perhaps one of the mistakes I made. And I think it was very eye-opening when I started to look at the skills and development that goes into great leadership, how much of a gap there was between some of the things I was doing. And so one of the mistakes perhaps I made in my early career was just assuming I was going to be good at it. And I think it is something like any skill, you've got to work at it, you've got to put time into it. And so I would definitely give that advice to anyone, which is whatever your learning style is, whether that's having training or finding a really good mentor or a podcast or some books, just spend some time really learning about leadership. I also think really spend some time identifying your leadership style. There's lots of different styles of leadership out there, and really understand which one fits your personality. Sometimes what might happen when you start to develop your leadership, especially for someone that's doing it for the first time, is you might see someone else in a position and you might try and emulate their style, and it doesn't fit your personality. You're gonna find that really, really difficult and be probably like less genuine. So I would definitely say that invest in yourself and spend a bit of time identifying what your leadership style is. So yeah, they're probably mistakes that I made, was maybe not looking at that early enough and just moving ahead in a way that I thought was this is what a leader looks like.
It's hard, isn't it? It feels like a journey when you're developing your style, because you're right, you do copy from other people and then you bring it together, evolve it and change it into what your style eventually becomes. When you say leadership style, I don't know if there are set styles, like defined styles almost, if there's a playbook to go, okay, these are typically the leaders, or do you mean more about just you feeling more comfortable in that role as a leader, sorry?
There's some famous ones, right? So there's the transactional versus transformational leadership. So some leaders are more transactional. Like if you do this, I can do this. And it tends to be slightly more old school, but it doesn't make it invalid. And then you've got the more transformational style of leadership, which is more kind of like, this is where we can get to. Here's where the sort of the evolution can happen, where you're sort of on the journey with them. And there's numerous other ones, but absolutely, yeah, there are different styles of leadership, and they're well documented. And yeah. And there's tests you can do, right? You can go and sort of answer like the personalities test, and are you red, green, blue, or yellow? Yeah. And I think they're very easy. There's loads of them on the internet, and just going and doing a few tests and saying, you might learn something about yourself. So
yeah, well, I think it's that journey to becoming self-aware, isn't it? Like, there's so many tools out there for you to do. I've done 1,000,001 personality tests before, but maybe in my early days didn't take it in. You go, okay, maybe I'm red or green or whatever it might be. So it's really taking that in and making. Being proactive in spotting that style and maybe implementing some parts of that as well, I think is a pretty big thing. So for you then, what would say your style is currently, and has that style changed over time?
That's a really good question. I would say historically I was very much, my style was sort of more servant leadership, which is sort of helping a team kind of achieve a goal and understanding what they need. And that's still there in terms of the core of my style, I would say. But I definitely feel my leadership style as I move more into a more senior business leader role has to be more transformational. I have to set the vision and give people the path and lead from the front more there. Whereas, that servant leadership style I felt was perhaps not the right one there. So I had to make a slight adjustment to my leadership style there. And so that's probably happened over the last sort of 2 to 5 years, I would say.
Okay, great. So we go back to the motivation piece then. So you figure out what motivates you, which is great, I guess, in a day-to-day. But how does that actually help when you're in that leadership role? Like, when does that come into play? Is it are you thinking about on a daily basis, or actually does that form a longer term view in terms of I come back to that when I need to make big decisions? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say, I think being really authentic with yourself about why you're doing something is really important, whether that's at home or in your career, and really understanding why that is. And sometimes as humans, I think we almost aren't always as honest with ourselves about what that is. We might tell ourselves, I want to do this thing, and it may not be the right thing. Yeah. And I think maybe doing the 5 whys with yourself, and also understanding like is where you're kind of headed and what you want to do the right thing, and understand like, are you just doing what you're doing because it's like repetition and a habit, and does that fit your ambition? So spending some time reflecting, I think, on your longer term goals is really, really important for personal life, family life, career. And I always give people this advice when they're not sure about the next step in their career, or they're not sure where they need to be. I just say, spend some time, get outdoors, get away from your desk, really think about what matters to you, not in terms of the job you do, but as a person. What are your core values, and what do you actually enjoy? What do you want to be? Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? It's a cliche, but do you want to just be 5 years on with where you are now? Do you want to be working outdoors more? Do you like working with people? Do you want flexibility in your life? Do you want money? I think when you sort of take it back to those core principles, for me, I found that made it a lot easier to then backfill. Okay, like am I in the right place? And on a given day, it's like, okay, I've got to do this thing. Normally, you think about leadership where you've got a challenge or a change to come through, and I can take it back to like, okay, well, here's my long-term vision, and this is the next step.
Yeah. Have you got better at that over time in terms of keeping that long-term vision, or do you still need to force yourself sometimes? Go for a walk, Mark, or get outdoors, get some headspace.
That's good. Definitely. I think, and again, we're talking about careers and work a lot. I think in my early career, definitely it's more like kind of rabbit in the headlights. You get into something and you're like, yeah, this is good. I can develop myself. And very much where I was headed was in line with the company vision and that kind of thing. As I've kind of come through and started a family and come through my career, I definitely think about longer term objectives a little bit more, and I'm very mindful of like how I'm going to get there, and am I taking proactive steps to get there, or am I just kind of letting it happen? I'm a big believer in manifestation, so I think if you are really clear about what you want to get to, you don't always need all the practical steps between here and there. But I have got better at that over time.
Nice.
It becomes more important, I think.
Great. So I guess as a leader, we spoke about this on the previous podcast, our first podcast with Matt Asprey, about loneliness. So you're at the top. Quite often you're there to, you mentioned servant leadership before, to serve the team, set the vision, drive everything forward. Everyone's coming to you with questions. You're not going to be motivated to 100% every single day. So how do you manage that in terms of you're not going to come in as 100% on top of things all the time, but how honest are you with your with your team about that? How do you get through the day? How do you not make it so you're up and down all the time as a leader?
Yeah. I mean, you talked about loneliness at the beginning, and I think that's very true. I think being in a senior position can be quite lonely. Often the decisions do come to you. I think what's really important just from a decision making is make sure you delegate either the decision or the information around why you're making the decision. Ultimately, I might have to make a lot of decisions, but I want the decisions to come to me, and there's various tools that we have in place for doing that in my workplace. And just being clear with people about why you made the decision in there as well, and involving the right counsel there. You know, I think if you put too much burden on yourself to have to make every last decision, then it can be really, really overwhelming, and it doesn't have to be lonely. Ultimately, there is one person that needs to make a decision, but you don't go away and sit in a dark room and think about it. So making sure you're involving the right people, you're getting the right counsel, I would say, helps with that. And it can be quite, it can be quite lonely if you allow it to be. I think in terms of the second part of your question, like how honest am I with my team? Yeah, I think it's really important to be human and honest with people. I think if you're having a bad day, say you're having a bad day. If you're tired, say you're tired. I think that's good empathy. I think it's really important to let people in your team or let people that you're working with know how you're doing. And I think it's really open. People will trust you for doing that, and then in return, hopefully you can earn that trust back. So when perhaps they're not feeling great, they can share that with you, and you can help them. And also being humble about it, they may just be like, well, you know, what can I do to help you right now? I think being humble as a leader is really, really important. I think for me, it's really important I don't let it affect my actions too heavily. Like, I mean, we're talking about the negative side of emotions here, but if you're having a bad day, it's like just being really clear with people, and often that can help them understand. But just if I feel that kind of negative emotion sink in, it's just a case of recognizing it, make sure, being really mindful that my actions and decisions aren't being impacted by that thing. So often I'll just have a grounding point. I know if I'm having a particularly challenging day, if I've got to make a big decision off the back of that, I just make sure I go back and think, is this decision being impacted by any of the events or emotions I'm feeling today? And really being kind of present in the moment there. And if it is, I just put it off in terms of a day, not long, but come back the next morning, sleep on it, and think like, okay, right, I'm just going to come back with fresh eyes and make a decision on this.
Yeah, it's hard. So go back to that humble piece. I think a lot of people listen to this would go, yeah, that makes sense, but it's also quite a brave thing to do, to be humble to your team, because you know some people might see that as a form of weakness, maybe. And also on the other side of that, you want to be the positive influence on the team and not be what some people might call a mood hoover and stuff like that. So that's a real fine balance. How do you find that balance between both of those things?
I think that is the most difficult balance. It really, really is. And if if your team are going through some challenges at the moment, and you come in with loads of positive energy, it's not going to hit right. It's going to seem really disingenuous, inauthentic. And I think it's really, really important not to do that. And if you keep like trying to do this like happy, Pollyanna, emotional leadership, then it's going to seem really disingenuous. I think that being humble is not a sign of weakness. I think what is a sign of weakness is not being clear about the outcome, or not communicating well, or not planning well. Then absolutely that would be a sign of weakness. But for me, it's like saying, hey, do you know what, maybe there's a big challenge going on at the moment. We've got some challenges, but here's what we're going to do about it. Just being honest about it, and this is the plan. And I think where you can be strong there is being stoic about it and saying, look, I know this is a challenge, but we're going to get through it. And here's the plan. Here are the ideas. What do you think? Help them, share in that. And I think that shows strength and humility by being clear about those things. In my experience, I think not trying to gloss over anything.
Have you looked into stoicism and stuff like that before? Is that something you practice? Or?
Yes, very much. Something I recognised in myself in my early career is I was quite hot-headed. Both in both positive and negative.
I can't imagine you being very hot-headed now. So you've gone through a transformation, of course. Yeah,
I am. I try and keep because I can be really excitable as well. Because the thing with me, it's not just we talk about some of the negative sides, but it's also the positive side where I know I'm conscious. You could be very kind of if you think about the bathtub curve of emotions. So it's about. I realised that as I transcended my management positions, not necessarily in leadership, that as you progress through a business and you have maybe more people reporting to you, or you have more responsibility and authority, people will look to you. And one of the things I realized is how you act, what you say, people will just take as gospel. If I walk into a room and say, what do you think about this idea? People will hear, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay.
so,
Yeah.
right. So I'd be really clear about that. And I think that gives you, so I became conscious of like, well, I need to be clear about this. And sometimes it's really right to expose those emotions because it's appropriate. And other times it's not. So for me, it was a case of really, I put time and effort into doing that to make good, for good leadership, to take good actions on it. So I'm not brilliant at it. So
I've only briefly looked into Stoicism, but I really like the idea of it. The one thing I buy into, which is very negative when you say out loud, but there's a phrase that in Stoicism that says, "Remember, you will die," which sounds awful. But what it means is you put everything into perspective, and nothing's as bad as it seems.
Memento mori.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's and what were in you today, in 2 weeks' time, a month's time, you wouldn't even remember it.
I can think of an example of this recently I had where I was in a taxi ride, 6 months ago with a couple of colleagues.
Yeah.
And they were trying to get to a train, I think, on time. There's loads of traffic. We're in an Uber and
Stress.
They were stressing out. And I was just talking about something calm. One of them turned to me going, "You're being really stoked right now." And I just said to him, "Look, there's no amount of you being stressed is going to make this taxi go any faster."
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really that. It's like, is what I'm doing actually going to help? What could I do to help the situation? And just being really objective about that. And like, if going into a blind panic is not going to help, it's not going to help you. It's probably not going to help your team. It might not help your line manager or boss. It's really important not to panic. So yeah,
100%.
It's funny.
You spoke earlier about, we spoke about decision making, and you said you had some things in your team or some structures maybe that you follow around making decisions. I wonder if there's some practical things you could share with the listeners around, as a leader, how do you make good decisions, and how do you empower your team to make good decisions?
I think that's really important. One of the things that people I've seen who move into a position of leadership for the first time is sometimes they can feel a bit overwhelmed by having to make all the decisions, that they feel that everyone's looking to them for all the answers, and that can be quite lonely. It can be quite overwhelming. I think when that happens, one of the tools I would absolutely recommend people use would be what I've heard called the 1-3-1, which is when someone comes to you with a problem or an idea or something they need help with. It's like, what's the one problem or challenge or idea? What are the 3 solutions or options available? And what one would they recommend? So you're enabling the conversation with that person. You're still potentially allowing yourself the ability to make the decision because they're making the recommendation, but it's also empowering them. And it's a way of giving them the opportunity to lead as well. And again, it's an old saying. I feel there's loads of sound bites in here, but the function of leadership is to create more leaders, even if that person is only leading themselves. So I think it's really important. So I recommend that tool.
That's a really good one. Yeah, that's. I think that'll be excellent for people who are listening to this, and it's really simple to implement, isn't it?
You could use it yourself.
Yeah. Do you use it with yourself sometimes when you have to make a decision?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah.
I'm going to start using that.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I like it.
And just combined with that, I think, is someone taught me in the last couple, someone of my good mentor of mine in the last couple of years gave me some advice, which was Mark, think about how much more information would you need to make a better decision? Do you have enough information to make the decision now? And it really hit home with me. And I'm obsessive in terms of detail and making the right decision, and I want to be successful. But sometimes that can lead into overworking a problem, right? And then being in a situation saying, have I got enough information to make in the right decision or the best decision I can right now? And I think that's really important to look at that when you're making the decision making with 1-3-1. It could be like, well, there's risks associated with all these outcomes. But do I have enough? And it comes back to that feel the fear and do it anyway. Susan Jeffers' book, which is, if I made that decision, what is the worst thing that could happen? And if it happened, could we handle it? I think reframing it around that is another great tool you can use. If I decided to climb a skyscraper today, probably a bit risky. Could I handle the worst outcome? Probably not.
No.
I'm choosing a big example, but sometimes it might just be, I don't know, that conversation I feel is difficult that I've got to have. If it goes badly, like could I handle that? Probably yes. So maybe have that conversation and just, it gives you that kind of confidence, I think, to say, like, I can handle the outcome. I'm a bit scared, but that's okay. Fear is normal, and you can train your brain through it. So
I really like that as well, and it helps you rationalize the decision after it's been made. So you can explain to somebody why you've made that decision because you've thought it through. That's a big thing. I think sometimes when people don't understand why a decision's been made, that's when issues can arise, right?
Yeah.
yeah, having a really clear idea of why you made that decision is important.
It's one of the things you said to me previously, like, eat the frog, right? If you've got a
Yeah.
bad thing to do it in the morning.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things, if you're asking me what, the thing I improved is definitely in my earlier career. I can think of difficult conversations, difficult scenarios. I would have put that off till Friday afternoon, last thing. And I just learned that it doesn't make it any easier. You may as well just do that thing first and get it out of the way. And
yeah,
right.
I have to do that. Otherwise, I will put it off forever.
Yeah.
A lot of what we're talking about is, and it's the phrase that's overused, but it's emotional intelligence, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How important do you think that is in leadership right now? And second to that, is it more important than when you started when you first became a leader?
That's really interesting. I would say it's one of the most important things. Leadership is about people, it's about emotion. Leadership exists because of change and challenges, right? Leadership is a function to lead yourself and other people through change. And to lead people through change, it's not necessarily about practicalities and management. It's about how are they feeling? What's their perception? So understanding what motivates people, how they're feeling, asking people how they're feeling, doing exactly the same with yourself, checking in, being authentic. So emotional intelligence is incredibly important. I actually think it's something that is not taught particularly well, leadership and emotional intelligence in the school system, and not necessarily in terms of training programs. It's something I always encourage people to do. It's something that often if you say to someone, do you want to learn more about emotional intelligence, it can feel a bit threatening, because it feels like you're saying to that person, like, you're a bit of a dullard, you don't really understand about emotional intelligence.
You're emotionally stunted.
Exactly that. So you have to be a little bit careful. I've definitely had that reaction from before from people where I've said, would you like to go on some emotional intelligence training? They're like, no.
What do you think of me?
Yeah. And I think it's just you can always improve in those areas. So yes, emotional intelligence is especially important. To answer the second part of your question, I think it's more important now than ever. I think the world of work, as always, evolves. I think 20, 30 years ago, it was a very different place to the way it is now. You go back further, absolutely. It was probably there was more autocratic leaders. There was probably more dictatorial leaders than there are now. Nowadays, I would say absolutely, you need to create a compelling vision. You need to create psychological safety in the workplace. You need to create direction. You need to create clear direction. You need to set clear expectations and accountabilities. Absolutely, that's true. But I think in terms of the environment that people thrive in, I think that we've evolved to realize that if you create trust and you create direction, you'll get better outcomes than if you're autocratic and authoritarian with individuals. And I would say to create that type of environment, you definitely need to be on your A game in terms of emotional intelligence with people and create that and get an engaging environment.
I just think it's so hard right now for leaders. There's so much more expected of you leading a team than there was before. All of what you just said there, you've got to understand all of those nuances, understand every person to a fine art, fine detail, and make a decision for the best of them, the collective group, the business. Investors. Feels like an impossible task when I say it out loud.
It's not impossible if you develop more leaders. I really mean that. And it's something I think as a leader, and this is the way you can tell if you've got a good leader. If that leader immediately starts investing in other people's leadership, you've got a great leader. If that person doesn't, then you've got someone who's perhaps potentially a little bit scared. They feel a little bit threatened by the development of other people, and that might be something to explore with that person. I definitely think if you develop other leaders, all the things I'm talking about in terms of for yourself, you're going to give to those people. And I can think of a number of times when I feel I've said to someone, read that book, or here's a podcast you could listen to, or around communication or confidence or conflict management, emotional intelligence, loneliness. There's just so many facets to leadership that are important. And if you can help someone learn, it takes the burden off you to have to lead every time. So
I guess it helps you longer term. But how much does ego come into this, right? So you mentioned there a bad leader doesn't invest with people straight away. Don't know if ego comes into this. I've definitely noticed since I've run 106, I've had to check my ego on several occasions about what good looks like, etc., etc. Have you had to manage your ego carefully, or you might not be very egotistical at all? I don't know.
I've got an ego. I'll be honest. I'll be humble. Everyone has an ego. But I think that's where you get confidence from, right? I do I like to be successful. I do like to succeed. I like to. I think I told you earlier. I like to look back and say that was a challenge for me. I like to be stretched, and I like to look back and say I achieved that. That was a difficult thing for me, and I was successful in doing that. So yeah, I do have an ego. What I would say is I also love seeing other people succeed. So I love looking at other people and I see them overcoming a challenge, especially when I can see them coming up to something and I'm like, you're going to find that difficult. And I can just say to them, and without trying to be, what's the word to say? Without trying to be annoying about it or inappropriate, I can say to them like, I think if you learn this thing, it'll be much easier. So I think for me, that is there. I think ego can also be a negative thing. I think, again, another soundbite for you is that A players hire A players, right? If you're a good leader, go and find better people than you at something. When you hire or develop them, really you should be looking at developing other people. And I think that ego can get in the way of that. If you look around your team or colleagues or people that you manage and you're threatened by someone in that team, I think it's a good opportunity to step back and say, well, why is that? What is my ego being attacked? And your value there becomes the development of those, and you really need to recognize that. So it can get in the way. I've absolutely seen it get in the way of people where they want like a team of very almost like middling achieving people through fear of like, what if someone becomes better than me or something. So I think it's really important to be like that, and people are capable of change, and sometimes it might be a bit of a scary place for that person to realize that, well, I have got a bit of an ego and I don't know what to do about it. And I think that's probably almost worse than not having an ego at all. So
It's I think it's difficult to manage. You've got to check your ego. You've got to manage other people's egos. I don't know. It's really, really tough.
Well, it's a tool, right? Because it's a motivator. If you know what someone's ego is, then that's really useful. I don't mean that in a manipulative way. You can have an honest conversation. Like, I know you really love this thing. Here's how we can help you do it more. I think that's a good thing.
That's a great point. Yeah. Flipping it to the other end of the spectrum there, you said at the beginning, put your oxygen mask on first. So I guess what you were getting at was make sure that you're looking after yourself and investing in yourself, and then you can start leading from a position of strength, I guess. But how do you do that? There's limited time in a day. You've got family lives, you've got team. I don't know if you've got some practical things that have helped you look after yourself better.
Absolutely. I think there's base needs, just making sure you're kind of eating right, sleeping fairly well, being in check with your emotions, having a healthy work-life balance, things like that are really, really important. I think those are base needs. I think being mindful of the impact of your actions on others, I think it's really, really important. And some of the things we talked about in terms of fostering a place of trust, whether that's in your personal relationships or in a professional relationship, continuing to focus on relationship development is really, really important. I think leading yourself first is about focusing on those things that motivate you and how you're feeling, and you making sure that you're having a good day, or if you're not having a good day, what how you can improve on that. Because if you're not in a good place, you're not going to have the energy and mindset to get other people in a good place. And I think it's really important. It's the most important thing.
I struggle with it because I feel guilty whenever.
Why do you feel guilty?
So I feel like if I'm stopping doing a particular task or something to look after myself or go for a walk or something like that, I feel like one, I should be doing something productive based. And it also plays into family life. So you finish work, go straight into family life. I feel guilty if I take some time away from that, because I'm like, okay, I should be spending time with the kids and partner and all this other stuff. So whenever I do take some time out for myself, which I do sometimes, there is always the feeling of guilt and the almost apologetic, I'm just going to go do this if that's okay. So that's how I feel generally. I don't know. I don't know if you ever feel that way. I don't know if others do, but that's how I feel sometimes when I do that.
I can relate to that. And I think when, especially in your position where you have a lot of responsibility or demand, then it can feel a bit like, well, if I'm not actively working on all of those things, then I'm actually not doing a good job, or I'm not being a good husband, or I'm not being a really, really good father. And I as a parent myself, and as a business leader, I think it's really important to be present, and I think it's really exceptionally important to be mindful of that. But I also think it's very important, you just got to give yourself grace, I think, to say, like, it comes back to what we were saying, if I am not the best to myself and what I need right now is just an hour where I can read a book or reflect or sleep, is to take that and just be be mindful of that. And if the conflict's internal with yourself, then you've only got yourself in the way, and you can be honest with yourself and say, like, I really think this is good. If the conflict's external, maybe that's an honest conversation and saying, like, I know this is important, that we've got to focus on this thing, but right now I just need to spend a little bit of time on this thing because that's important to me, and that will help, and be honest there. And it's not always easy, but
it's hard.
But I think you've got to prioritize it. It's very important.
I always feel better afterwards. Always.
There we go. Yeah, that's a good rationale.
It always, after I do it, I go, yeah, why don't I do this more?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like my brain instantly forgets and go, oh, guilt again, and all this. It's an interesting one.
There can be an element of not ego, but an element of like presenteeism tied up in that. And I think that's probably something that took me a long time to realize, is that if you don't do that, you are going to risk burning yourself out or being resentful about something, and then it all comes flying out at the wrong time, and into a conflict,
100%. So we spoke a little bit about you can't be 100% all the time in terms of motivations and stuff like that. When you're feeling that you're in a rut, let's say, nothing's going right for you in the business, you don't feel like you're being maybe the best leader, how do you shake yourself out of that and get back to being you and being a good leader again?
I go for a walk.
I
get outside.
And you don't feel guilty?
I don't feel no. I've famously done this, and I just get to a point sometimes. I'll just do it on a whim. I just stand up, and sometimes it's a 5-minute walk around. I pace around at work quite a lot. I think probably people are like, what's going on? And it's like left brain, right brain. I'll walk around and do something. Sometimes I've just walked out and gone for sort of a 2-hour hike just on and it doesn't happen very often, but I think it's really important. I think it does two things. It changes your environment, which is going to change your thinking. It comes back to, if I continue to sit here and chew over this problem, am I actually going to solve it, or am I just going to dig myself into a hole of negative thinking or not the right solution? And I think it just helps you sort of reframe, and you can start asking yourself some of those questions, like, why is this important? How does it align with my goals? What does it help us achieve as a business? And you can come back. The same as like sleeping on a problem, right? It's right at the end of the day, and you've got to make some big decision, and you've got a big problem, and you feel pressure to make the decision. Sometimes it's just a case of giving yourself that grace and communicating, saying, I just take the evening, I'll come back to this in the morning, communicate that to people, and say, I'm going to come back and make this decision in the morning. And then when you wake up, I'm pretty sure you'll be like, oh yeah, that's the right one. And then, it'll feel easy. So, yeah.
So on that decision making then, so you, as a leader, you make so many decisions, you're going to get stuff wrong.
Right.
How would you get better at being okay with that?
That's a great question. And you're going to you should be in a position where you're getting more stuff wrong than you're getting right. And that's going to sound crazy, but it's how you learn, making mistakes. And I really think this is important when we talk about psychological safety for other people, is foster that environment where people can get stuff wrong. For me, it's just a couple of tools, like be retrospective, reflect on it. Don't be too hard on yourself. I definitely think about that in my early career. When I made a mistake, I felt terrible. And again, someone else gave me some fantastic advice, and they said, just because you made one mistake or this thing isn't right, it doesn't mean you're a terrible person, And I was like, it was really good advice at the time, because I think they probably looked at me and just thought, oh yeah, Mark's in a complete hole at the moment. He probably thinks he's awful. And they just came over to me. It doesn't mean you just made one mistake, it's fine. And I think it's really important. Some people are really scared of making a mistake. And like I said, there's lots of mindset. Good emotional intelligence is good. I think I've mentioned it a couple of times already. Things like the feel the fear and do it anyway. The Ruth Jeffers book. There's a number of things written around that are quite good in terms of tooling. It's okay to fail. Just try and fail small and often, and make it a small failure, and understand if you made a mistake, why it happened, how you might avoid it next time. Sometimes it's unavoidable, just being honest.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
It goes back for me. I know it definitely goes back to school. I used to hate getting stuff wrong at school, and when I get stuff wrong now, you just feel that little gut twist, and it's like, oh no, I got something wrong, and you're worried what people are going to think about it. But you're right, they're usually fine.
Being confident in your own identity is really important. And again, there could probably be 8 podcasts in this, but imposter syndrome, and we're like rabbit holing on that. I think that's really, really important. I think this is where ego can be really powerful. Is if you have a good, healthy ego, your self-worth and identity is defined by you. Yeah. And if you make a mistake and someone says to you, that was a rubbish decision, they can think that, and it might be a rubbish decision in their eyes. But if you are strong in yourself, then you can be more objective about it and say, okay, yeah, it was a rubbish decision. How would we avoid that next time? and I'm not a terrible person, and
Yeah.
we're going to move through this.
Yeah, actually the ego thing is, I always thought ego is almost the negative point. You'd be right. If you can harness that in the right way, as you described here, that could be really powerful. Really powerful. One thing you said to me in prep, which I'm not sure I totally understood, was self-actualization.
Right, yes.
So what is that?
So this is Maslow, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which for anyone listening, I guess if you Google it or if you don't know, it's based on the principle of these different hierarchies and the from a societal and human basis. So the very low levels, you've got the basic human needs, so food, water, air. Above that, you've kind of got the social needs and security, and then you've got love. And ultimately at the top, you've got self-actualization, which is a very fancy way of saying growth and living the best as a human. And I think what's really important with this of leadership, and something I really focus on, is by being the best you can be, it helps. It's a call to action to help other people do that as well, and really being honest and understanding like what it is you're motivated by. When you achieve all of these other needs underneath it, and you have a very healthy lifestyle, you have security, you've got good relationships, you've got love, you've got self-esteem. We talk about ego, but the ego is an element of self-esteem. And then above self-esteem, you've got self-actualization, and this idea of having a peak experience as a human, in terms of having a very positive experience that's beneficial to you, and achieving what you want to as a goal. And I think being able to understand and experience that for yourself can help you then look at that for other people. And it also helps you understand that if I'm not eating right, then that's going to start to chip away at all the other pieces here. So it just undermines like some of the things we were talking about underlines some of the things we were talking about earlier in terms of how do you keep yourself healthy? How do you build self-esteem? How do you manage your ego in a healthy way?
It's a really clear framework, isn't it, to make sure you get a chance to come back and reflect on yourself, but also a great tool to use with people in your team, right? You can literally walk them through that framework, and have those honest conversations about each one and getting to that point.
It's like you were saying earlier in stoicism and memento mori, and it's a little bit dark, but for me it really undermines how I am as a person, which is in my life I really want to live my life to the fullest, absolutely, and I want to make sure other people in my life can live their lives to the fullest as well. And I think if you think about that as a function of leadership, that's really exciting. I want to have those opportunities where, as a parent, I have those fun times with my kids, and I look back and I have those fantastic memories where, I don't know, we climbed a mountain or we did something fun. And at work I'm the same. I want to have those big achievements where we landed that big client or we made a product that no one else did. And you have those moments, those product launches, like probably how people feel maybe when they see a rocket launch for the first time, or a plane they designed. You get that real sense of pride and achievement. And for me, I think it's a really essential part of living life to the full. So
yeah, that's really awesome. How I'm going to be negative again. But
sorry, I got a bit too exciting there.
No, I think it's great. But
yeah,
how often with those hierarchical of needs do you feel like you're meeting them all? Like, I'm just careful that we can say all this great stuff, but is it always achievable? is the thing. Sometimes it can feel out of reach sometimes.
I think so, and I think it's really important to understand you're not going to feel like that every moment of every day.
Yeah.
And you might have one of these situations once a month or maybe once a year. How often it's happening is not important. I think what is important is you're mindful about what it is, the foundations, and just thinking about, well, what are the base things, like you said, am I being healthy? Am I being mindful of my relationships? Am I being mindful of my self-esteem? I can't say I'm perfect at it. I definitely have moments of self-reflection where there are sort of minor crises, or moments where I'm conscious my self-esteem is being undermined because I'm thinking about, oh God, this is terrible. Am I doing the right thing? And I think it comes back to emotional intelligence maybe, and just recognizing that and stepping back and going, okay, like, is that true? What can I do about it? But I don't profess to be an expert. Yeah, you're not going to be amazing all the time. You can have bad days.
But again, if you just understand that and go, actually, I'm having a bad day today, it's fine. What am I going to do? Some actions that hopefully mean tomorrow will be better.
Yeah.
All of this always comes down to, for me, it's just not getting carried away in the moment when you're either feeling too bad or or feeling too excited. It's, like I say, it's being somewhere in the middle and just understanding and have a bit of a wider view of what's going on.
Yeah.
And being a bit more present. It's hard. It's so difficult. It's easy to say out loud, but so difficult to do.
Yeah.
In the moment. Let's finish around goal setting and stuff like that. So I don't know if you are goal orientated, but like, what part has that played in you getting better as a leader, becoming a better leader longer term?
Setting and communicating goals is really important, whether it's a self goal or other people or a business goal. I think it's really important to be clear about the goal and why. Communicate it. One of the things I learned is you've got to communicate it well and regularly.
Yeah.
Like, saying something once is not enough. That was a hard lesson for me, I think, as a leader. Sometimes I think, I said this thing, everyone knows about it. It's like, nope, that doesn't work like that. You've got in. Yeah, and also the why, why that's important. I think if you set a good goal, all paths will lead you there, which is really important. Also, what's important for me, and I think a lot of people, is the first step. And something I recognize for myself is the first step for me is the hardest. After I've made that step, I will charge down that as fast as I can. But I can procrastinate around it. So for me, I do set goals. I have to set clear goals and make sure they're aligned with whatever reasoning or values we have. And I have to make the first step really easy, and the next steps, easy. And then what's the next step? What's the next step? I don't need to know every step along the way. I just need to know the next step or the next two steps, and that's really important. Again, I was very fortunate to have some good mentoring and guidance over the last few years in this regard. And again, it's something that sounds very simple, but it really is important. I would definitely encourage anyone who's not clear about how they're going to get to their goals. What's the next step? You don't need to know the whole plan. Just where you go and what's the next step.
Yeah, I like that. Great. Final question that we always finish on. So if someone stepped into a leadership role right now and they're listening to this, what would be your advice for them?
That's a really good question. I would say, don't be too hard on yourself. Understand you're going to make more mistakes than you will successes. And if you're not, then perhaps you're not learning. Don't go out there deliberately trying to make mistakes, but just accept it's part of the process. Invest in yourself. Go and understand your personality type, understand what motivates you, and invest in self-development. Go out there and learn, and whether it's books or podcasts, and find a good mentor, and accept that leadership is a responsibility and not a job title.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Right, ready for some quick fire questions, Mark?
I am ready for some quick fire questions.
Okay.
Got some quick fire answers.
Best advice ever received?
Be yourself.
Nice. AI for or against?
For, absolutely.
Nice. One piece of tech you couldn't live without?
My phone.
Yeah. One book or audio book you would recommend to somebody?
We mentioned it. Actually, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Or a close second, I'm going to be quick, is Steve Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Nice. If you weren't in tech, what would you do?
Work outdoors.
Nice. Morning routine? You got a set routine every morning?
Make sure I eat something. Make sure I shower.
Yeah.
That sounds obvious.
Good.
Yeah. I like to shower in the mornings, get myself motivated and going. I know some people's routines is different in the evening, so
I don't eat breakfast. I can't eat breakfast.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I feel ill if I eat breakfast.
I never used to, and then I realised I was just having crashes mid-morning.
Really?
So I had to make myself.
What's one thing you wish you would have done sooner as a leader?
Invest in myself and my leadership skills.
Favorite food?
Oh God, that's a tough one. Curry. I'm going to say curry.
Yeah, excellent. What takes up most of your time?
Talking with people, making decisions and talking with people, I would say at the moment. Yeah.
And if your team had to describe you in 3 words?
Oh, that's brutal.
What would they say?
The safer word. I hope they would say I was approachable and humble and motivated.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for loads of practical stuff in there.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.
Yeah.